Hi, I'm Kevin,
And I'm Amanda.
and we are serving up.
All that jam. A lighthearted look at the weekend jam bands.
Where we break down the jam scene's biggest stories,
Talk new bands.
upcoming tours,
And show reviews. A little laughing, some hot takes, and an always positive message for the community.
Week of January 15th, 2024, Ben Bloom.
Welcome back. We are halfway through January and lots of winter tours are revving up. I caught Spafford the other night, saw some Humphreys in North Carolina and J-Rad. Everyone seems like they are firing on all cylinders. Also watched some of the Radiators 46th anniversary, and we can get into that if you want to in a bit. But Amanda, you were out this weekend. What's the word from Colorado?
Well, the word is that it is chilly outside, but I'll tell you what, inside Washington's here in Fort Collins, steamy, hot. We saw Railroad Earth this weekend. They're just sounding so good these days, and they're wrapping up their first tour of the year, and I think they're just hitting the ground with everything they got. It's been a lot of fun.
Fantastic, fantastic. Yeah, I watched the Rads last night, the whole show. I didn't watch either of the other two nights. The whole thing saw bits and pieces. They played till 3 in the morning here because they played till 2 in the morning in New Orleans. I was so mixed. There were like glimpses of the band that I loved with all my heart, and then it seemed like they try to do as many songs as they can. They play 3 shows a year, and nothing ever got the full treatment. It seemed like every time they were about to just take it and go to that next level, they'd wrap the song up and move to the next one. But yeah, I miss them. It was good to hear the sound guy talking, Kenny. I love Kenny so much. But I will
brings
say
you
that
back.
whatever's going on at Tips with the sound on Nugs, I guess Kenny mixed for the room, but like the keyboards were loud, and when Dave would pick up different guitars, they were at different levels, so it was strange. But I guess you aren't hiring a second person to come into New Orleans to mix specifically for his stream there. So.
You always wonder about that though, because it is different. Although, who were we talking to or had learned about? Was it the fish stream that gets set up for the webcast, basically? Right.
And now they've brought in the guy who engineered the last album on the road with them, so it was no longer just their sound guy doing it.
Exactly.
So.
Yeah, totally.
Interesting. So we actually just a few minutes ago spoke to Alan Evans, and he was talking about trios and things like that, amongst a lot of other stuff. Look for that coming up. But got me thinking about our interview this week with Ben Bloom from the Polyrhythmics, which are far from a trio. Can you give us a little background on them?
Yeah, and that is true. They are absolutely far from a trio. So the Polyrhythmics, they're part of that Seattle kind of underground deep funk scene, I guess I would call it. Lots of brass, lots of percussion. They kind of mix it up quite a bit, that instrumental like R&B, progressive jazz, Afro beat. Kevin, when we talked to Ben, we spent a bunch of time kind of breaking down what it means to be part of an instrumental only band, especially one that has so many artists in it. They tour like crazy. I've been a huge fan of theirs for a very long time, and Ben came and just chatted about a whole bunch of things. So looking forward to everybody getting to hear that one.
Yeah, so there that is. Stay tuned. It's coming up. But first,
the top 3 stories of the week.
Yeah, let's get into some stories. So, Kevin, we've got a bit of a follow-up this week. We've spent some time over the last few months trying to break down Spotify's new terms of payment in terms of streams, number of streams. And I guess it was maybe a couple months ago, we had talked about what was coming up for 2024. And this was the kind of global streaming pyramid scheme, I guess, that Spotify's put into play, where any tracks that have less than 1,000 plays now basically are not going to get any revenue. It's just not a possibility. And, it's one thing to talk about that. And even that's a pretty bold statement, right, to try to understand, wrap your head around. But now we have some information to tell us exactly how many tracks that actually is. And you had found this article. I think it's something like 83%.
Close, yeah, 82 points, right there, yes.
Yeah, yeah. So, and I guess that comes to about 152 million songs or tracks that have fewer than 1,000 streams. This was last year, so completely ineligible. And the one thing, Kevin, I'll mention too, and then we can chat about this, is at the very end of this article, which was on Digital Music News, that same breakdown that let us know, how many songs would be out of contention, showed that something like 45 million tracks within that bigger number had 0 streams. So these efforts, to kind of keep up with just this streaming world, it really stops and makes you think a little bit about, like, what are we really doing here with this? And I say this as a Spotify user, but more and more I'm thinking to myself, I need to figure something out.
13% of the tracks are going to get all the money. And that's Taylor Swift. And nothing against Taylor Swift or any of these people, Lizzo or whoever it is, but, they don't need the money. I mean, they obviously they need to be paid for what they are, but you're cutting out all these other people who are the lunch pail musicians who, this is how they're just barely keeping the lights on.
Yeah, exactly. And the article brought up a point, and it was a little bit buried. Maybe it's because it was more of just a speculative type of comment that, thinking about that and basically this consolidation of revenue, right, to the top of the funnel, and then that's it. How many artists would reconsider what they're doing or how they want to approach their craft, or at all? Maybe not just because of Spotify, but it's a symptom of a much bigger issue also. And so how much music might we never have a chance to hear, potentially? It's kind of what the article was starting to say. And it's something to think about, for sure.
Definitely. Something to watch, too. I mean, something is going to break. The musicians, maybe they, I know there are musicians union. Maybe there needs to be a Spotify union or something where everybody except that top 13% are the only tracks on Spotify all of a sudden. How much money is Spotify making them? Because I'm not going there to listen to Taylor Swift.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you have a situation where if it was possible, and it is some way, to kind of mobilize just in sheer numbers all of, you think about all those other artists, it could be something that eventually has to come down to even legislation. I mean, I don't know. It's going to be something. I think you're right, though, that one way or another, there is a tipping point to where the industry at large is probably going to have to do something.
Right. And musicians, in real estate, I know you've heard of Zillow. Basically, Zillow's model is if I list a house and I put it into the computer system that I pay money to be in so other agents can see it, this computer system has turned around and sold that feed to Zillow. And then Zillow turns around and tries to sell leads to other agents off of my work. And it seems like Spotify is the same model. We're just users. Well, we don't provide really any tangible service.
Right, exactly. And, I think that the ease of using a platform like Spotify, I mean, if you think about Amazon, it's very similar, make it so easy to just access everything that you could possibly need. But really, at the end of the day, with this kind of policy in place now, I find myself thinking about it constantly.
I wonder what's going to happen with Bandcamp, because I would say Bandcamp, you aren't going to get a Taylor Swift on Bandcamp, but I'm going to find all the music we like, like Lena Langendorf, found her on Bandcamp just came across it, and I was like, I love this. I said to you, you like this? You were like, yeah, I love this. Let's talk to her. But
Amazing.
Spotify isn't giving me that.
No, and if they did, because there's a ton of world music on Spotify, there's some stuff you would never ever think you would find, but it's just handled in such a different way. And I think that's part of it too. Is it's Bandcamp is clearly for the artist, at least more than a lot of other platforms are. So, I'm imagining that at some point we will start to see artists speaking up about this new policy. But I also think to myself, maybe this is just something like, well, they finally just came out and said it. So let's move on,
Or you do the thing where, let's say you listen to one artist on Spotify a bunch, go to their website and buy a t-shirt. At least they're going to get that $15.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So there's going to be more absolutely about this. And, like you said, just find different ways to support. There's so many ways to do that.
And we will follow this.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, speaking of trying to follow information, Coachella, which I've never really had much interest in attending, but obviously very well-known festival. There's some stuff going on that I honestly, Kevin, have not thought about before, which is festival announcements. We know that there are timing considerations with tour date announcements. There's always a lot of moving parts and logistics. But just recently, I think it was last week, Jambase had published an article that Coachella has been kind of causing some rifts in terms of other festivals, like Sewanee is another one. Resonate is another one, because of some late announcements that are then causing backlogs of other announcements that need to go out because of radius clauses. And that's really, I think, what this comes down to a lot. And it's something that I don't know if we've talked about specifically, but I thought maybe we could talk it, right? I mean, it's...
Well, I've had direct dealings with this. Years ago, the Radiators played this festival in Baltimore that's a free festival called Artscape. So it's not like anybody was making any money. They paid the band to come in. I wanted to do an after show. They charged me an extra $1,500 because of the radius clause. The person who had the contract for Artscape said, well, if you're going to have them play, that's fine. You need to pay them their $5,000, but you need to give me $1,500. And I was like, dude, it's a free festival put on by the city, but I got screwed by that. And, I still to this day do not like that guy. But this is the same thing, though. I guess Coachella has first dibs to announce the people, and they aren't announcing them. And so these other festivals can't announce, and the other festivals are smaller, trying to sell their tickets. They need the name out there in order to get the dollars, and they're really getting screwed by it.
Yeah, and there's other components to that radius clause also, one of which actually resulted, I learned, in an antitrust suit against AEG and Coachella. This was probably 6 years ago or so, because at that time, one of Coachella's clauses in the contract prevented artists from playing basically in North America in a certain part of the country for like a 6-month window. And they still do things like this, but it's not to that degree. So yeah, one of their clauses was artists couldn't play in LA, the Inland Empire, or San Diego within a certain window unless they were playing at events or venues also controlled by AEG.
Jeez. Well,
I mean,
where is Resonate? Is that in Florida?
Yeah.
So that's the other side of the country weeks beforehand. What could that possibly affect Coachella?
It doesn't, I mean, to us, it makes no sense, right? But that level of control is something that is very shocking to me, and it shouldn't be at this point. I guess I just don't think about it because that's not part of my day-to-day. But then you see the dominoes right? And because everything is kind of so monetized that I guess underpinning like every tour, all this stuff is really just a bunch of terms and conditions.
Hmm. Right. It's the ugly underside, I guess, of the way it works. And if you want to play,
Mm-hmm.
you're stuck in that. I'm just
Yeah,
glad that a lot of the bands we love, like an Umphreys or something, doesn't seem to have to fall under that.
right, right. Yeah, but some of it's just so excessive.
Well, I'm sure they have them in their contracts, but it's probably like you're playing Chicago. You can't play within 100 miles of Chicago 2 weeks
Right.
before or after or something,
It's like Trader Joe's, right? Don't they have rules on how close together their stores
Right.
can be in a certain
Yeah.
area? I mean, yeah, there's some things that just make sense, but yeah,
A
very
100
much
miles is
coast to
different
coast.
than
Yeah,
country,
cross
coast to
country,
coast.
right? 3,000 miles away. Craziness. You mentioned Umphreys there, and the last story was just more of I guess, a great exclamation point on what's really turned out to be, I think, what will go down as maybe a very special time for Umphreys McGee this last year. So Chris Meyers just sat in, didn't sit, let me start over. Chris Meyers played his first complete show this past week after being out for the majority of 23, and then, as we know, sitting in during the New Year's run just a little bit. And that's got to feel so good. I know that the crowd, from all accounts, was very excited. I had some friends who have been at some of these recent shows, and I'm just super happy that things worked out so positively, considering what a major surgery he went through last year.
Right. Robo shoulder there.
Mm-hmm. That's
It's
right.
fascinating. I got to watch some of it. Fine for him. He hasn't missed a beat. And the set list, there were a bunch of tunes that were not played while he was gone, which I found fascinating because when we
Mm-hmm.
talked to Joel and Ryan, they were like, "Oh, anything was on the table for anyone." But some of these songs, I guess, just never popped up in any of the conversations. So, and they
Yeah,
broke
must
out
not.
Red. They broke out King Crimson's Red, which they hadn't played in forever, and I guess it's probably the 50th anniversary of that album this year. God help us.
We don't need to think about that one though. But in typical, I think, Humphreys style, they're just such honest, open, authentic people, really, in such a great way that they kind of go about things. I had read also that between songs, I think in the second set, maybe. Brendan offered some words of advice to a newly married couple in the crowd. Basically, don't fuck it up.
Right. Punch in.
And
Gotta punch in.
that's right. Keep it keep it succinct. But there's a great write up of the entire show on Live for Live Music, and for those that were in Charlotte, because I think that's where the show was, they definitely were in for a good one, and I'm glad that things are moving in
Right.
that direction.
After I got married, we went and saw the Super Suckers open up for Reverend Horton Heat. And during the Super
Nice.
Suckers, toward the end of the set, I sparked up a joint. They threw me out. Right? I go out front. My wife didn't leave. She stayed in. And I'm standing out front, and this woman's like, "Oh, I have an extra ticket." So I went back in and
Mhm.
got to see Reverend Horton Heat. Toward the end of Reverend Horton Heat's set, I fired up another joint. Same guy. He's like, "Didn't I throw you out of here once?"
With a double X.
Yeah. I was like, "Yep, let me pay my tab and I'll be going on my way."
That's right. Have a great evening. Oh
Oh
man.
my. So you were talking about down to earth, great people, easy to talk to. We've mentioned Humphreys and Alan Evans today. Ben Bloom, I would throw into that. So we're gonna check out some of this clip. He talks about what polyrhythm is, and that leads into respecting tradition and originality and how those three things come together. So let's check it out and we'll see you on the other side.
I definitely want to get into kind of live versus recording stuff, but first I just need to like nerd out on something which I've always loved. The fact that the name of the band is in itself a musical term. I had a radio show for a long time, the Barline Shift, which is a jazz term in its own. And, just that idea of polyrhythm, of the kind of that contrasting rhythms, happening at the same time, to totally butcher the definition, I'm sure, but
No, that's
just the
right.
idea of it. Is there something about that in particular from a musical standpoint, just from a methodology standpoint, that has drawn you there? Maybe different than, other styles or other ways that music could be played.
Well, I can really only speak to myself in terms of how I found polyrhythmic music, but I look at it as, in our collective now, it's really like you can't really do it without each other, right? One person can't really create a polyrhythm with one voice or one, a drummer can with multiple limbs and that type of thing, but so we need each other. You're relying on someone else to kind of make, to make this whole thing happen. And improvising in that spirit is also kind of a unique twist, because you're relying on all these different things to be sort of improvising around you in order for things to actually, to have flow. So that has kind of taken on sort of new relevance to me in this band. But I've always been attracted to musically parts. So like things that make up the whole, whether it's like the multiple guitar parts in James Brown's music or in Fela Kuti's music, to like, Latin ensembles where you, instead of having one drummer, you have, 15 percussionists or different people just basically doing one job that kind of make up this whole thing. There's this feeling of like breathing that happens when you have more than one person or many people sort of collectively doing something where they're trying to really lock in together, but each one has their own millisecond delay of whatever going, like everyone has their own swagger or their own approach to it. And those tiny minute differences between your voice and your voice and your voice can create this sort of really trancey type of feeling that I've always identified with in music. Whenever I heard like the Headhunters music, or whenever I heard like I said, early James Brown music, or, I grew up in the 90s in the New York City area, and I was really turned on to Antibalas Orchestra early on, who was basically kind of carrying the torch of the Fela Kuti movement. And, I would go to those shows and just watch all the, just close my eyes sort of and feel the feeling of of the power of all these different parts kind of making up the whole. So it's always been attractive to me. I've always kind of felt as myself as a musician, as a support, in more of a support role than like a leader in terms of like a soloist or anything like that. I always have enjoyed kind of more sitting back and being a part of a brick in the wall, you know what I mean? Yeah, so I think that's kind of the way that I've been attracted to it. I've always, and, now when I listen to pop music and I listen to the things that always sort of, that always resonate with me in music when I hear it are phrasing and rhythmic development. I always hear those things first before I hear melody. And it's kind of like, I don't remember who told me this, but I've heard of this a few times now, but like, it's like, if you put the syllable in the wrong place, it doesn't make any sense. Right. It's like, it's all about the phrasing and the emphasis that really can kind of get the message across. And, that's always been the most powerful part about music for me. So it finds me in a polyrhythmic funk band.
Oh, Kev, we can't hear you.
I had the cat meowing. Sorry. I was just thinking. I was just thinking that you have all these different. You beautifully blend all these different elements together. The Calafut, the Herbie Hancock, and this and that over the year. How do you respect the traditions you're drawing from as you're putting them into this amalgamation of all this other things?
Well, I think the greatest respect is that we're not trying to emulate anybody. We are products of our influences and unapologetic about it. One of the things that I try to do is obviously turn everybody I know onto the people that I like, that have influenced me. And as an artist, I've always been taught and always taken the approach of, if you like something, what you should be listening to are the things that they listen to, not necessarily the things that people are listening to who like them. right? And so that's kind of the way that I feel like all of us at this point, the musicians in Polyrhythmics, sort of pay homage to that spirit. We've done the work. We try not to we're all sometimes like we show up at on tour or a gig and there's like something catchy that someone showed us that we're like all that we're into for that moment, right? Have no idea what the influences are, and we're influenced by that in the moment, and that can sometimes come out. But I think mostly like we're traditionalists in the sense that we're like really serious about the music that we like, and we debate it often and have lots of conversations about that. But what we're trying to present musically is not an emulation at all. We're really trying to make something that is new, that's unique, that stands the test of time, that in 100 years from now, when someone blows the dust off the record and puts it on the platter, they're like, oh, this is Polyrhythmics. That's what this music is. And this band is influenced by that band or whatever. I think that's kind of like the ultimate goal, is to leave something behind that is completely unique, that doesn't have another likeness of it, or if there is other likenesses of it, it's obvious that they're what we now call derivative to the art, so that I hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, that almost reminds me, we had talked with Brian Haas a while back when in his work with Electric Beethoven and Jacob Fred, and he was talking about growing up in the Midwest, and not really having access, like none of us did, to the internet, to be kind of able to play note for note with a video or something like that. And how, today it's just, there's so much available for people who are coming up in the scene to emulate. And it's almost hard not to do that in a sense, because there's so much available to them. Do you agree with that? I don't know, in terms of like your own history, and you just mentioned like the 90s New York. I'm from Jersey, same time frame basically. And, I think that there's something to that, but I think that people can still be original no matter what. I'm just curious, what you might think about that.
I think that there's not as many really good teachers as there used to be, unfortunately. And so I think that what's available to people is instant gratification. Is I can learn any Jimi Hendrix song that I want to, and if I spend enough hours doing it, I can probably sound just like Jimi Hendrix. And that's something that was not available to me when I was coming up as a guitar player. And I'm like jealous of the fact that I didn't have access to that, but only because I also had teachers who were really like drilling down the things that I needed to really learn, which was rhythm and, phrasing and the things that are still important to me to this day that we preach. I think that every like generation goes through the technological growth and all this different stuff where we're like, oh, this is who, I have no idea what the future brings. I think that musicians are more talented now than they've ever been on this planet. I think that the idea of, I hear a lot about people talking about how they're not hearing anything new or nothing fresh, and that how musicians are kind of just regurgitating the old. And I think that if you look in our live music scene, I can't really argue with that. People are drawn to covers and, it's like, oh yeah, I want to hear the song that we can all sing along to. And I get that. I understand the feeling of nostalgia and togetherness that the live concert experience brings. But I think it does do a disservice to original music in the sense that it doesn't give them the platform or the financial stability a lot of artists to actually, elevate their art and let it grow and breathe in the same way that it maybe did in the 60s or 70s or 80s even. However, I don't think any artist from any generation will ever tell you that they were raking it in, when they were trying to present live music. So I think it's really hard to get a grasp on the big picture. And someday on the other end, we'll all be looking down and being like, oh, that's the way it was. I didn't, there we go. But I think that, to give you another perspective, I'm constantly hearing new stuff that blows me away. A lot of it is like, I don't even know where to begin in understanding the sound, electronic music, I think, has gone way beyond where it started and is in a realm where there's a ton of creativity and newness coming out of that genre that turns me on in some ways. A lot of it is because I just don't understand all the moving pieces of it. but even in fusions of different music coming out from around the world, I think that a lot of that music is coming to a surface now that never had a platform for it before. So I don't know how to answer the question specifically, but I feel like that there's more of everything right now than there's ever been, and it's harder to maybe find the cream of the crop when it comes to instrumental stuff or new music that people are like pushing boundaries with. But I think it's out there, and I think that all of the technological tools that are available to musicians today are so amazing that I expect nothing but amazing musicians coming, in the future for us to witness. So I'm looking forward to that.
It's really awesome to go back and listen to this again. And I really did appreciate how Ben kind of was able to talk through what just that term means. What is a polyrhythm? And it makes so much sense when you think about the traditions that they bring that from. We're going to get back into the rest of the interview in a minute. Ben's going to chat about cover songs and, as we mentioned earlier, just what it is to be an instrumental band, especially in this day and age in the music scene. But before we do that, want to just make sure to remind everybody to hit us up on social media at All That Jam Pod on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, allthatjampod.com, and then YouTube. Don't forget about that. Lots of interviews there. Kevin, I appreciate that you're putting all those up. It is great to have a spot where they can live. And then, of course, if you're listening to us, give us a like, subscribe, all the things. It is so cool to see even, a couple of reviews out there, and we'd love more and love to hear from you too. So before we get back into Ben's interview, Kevin, do you want to tell us a little bit about what is coming up this week?
Yeah, I certainly do. Well, tomorrow, on Tuesday, we got Fireside Collective, and they have a drummer. They've added a drummer. They got rid of banjo, and they're going to be touring with Airborne, who's a friend of the channel. So look for that on Tuesday. Wednesday, Getting to Know FBR. They are a couple. They're getting married soon. I think the album release is coming up, and that's what we're focusing on there. Thursday, we got Greg Ormont from Pigeons talking about their upcoming tour. Another, oh my God, he was so easy to talk to. So fantastic. On Friday, Getting to Know Muskrat Flats with Patty McCann. Saturday, we got Peter Martin, fantastic pianist. We've put out a couple with him already about Wynton Marsalis and the Young Lions, which was the New York jazz school in the 80s and 90s. Jazz school meaning that's what was going on there. And then finally on next Saturday, Midnight North, we actually go through and kind of do a track by track of their Diamonds in the Zodiac. We get into a Hunter lyric that ended up being on the album, and just lots of guests. So that's going to be fantastic. So check that out. But without further ado, let's jump back in with Ben Bloom. Do you think there was something to be said for back in the old days when you wanted to learn to play Manic Depression, that all you had was the record? So you might not have got it right, but maybe that taught you something that creates your own style, as opposed to here's exactly what it is, learn it and be a clone.
100%. I'm sure that had an influence on people. There's this thing, where we fill in the gaps and information that we don't. It's like, I kind of remember the way that song goes. So you kind of play through it and, maybe you played it right, or you played it in the spirit of, or whatever it is. But you're right. That does lead you to new things. And I'm sure that people learned it that way. I grew up, at a time where we didn't really have, I had vinyl records from my parents and stuff like that. But I was listening to CDs and was able to hit pause on the stuff. So I kind of missed out on got to slow down the record to learn my riffs part. But I was definitely told that story by a lot of my elders, So, I think that to the same point, when I go to learn something off of YouTube, if I have a gig, like a pickup gig or something like that, and there's a cover tune that's on there that maybe I know, or maybe I've heard a little bit, but I don't really know how to play it. The first place I'm going to go to is a YouTube, someone playing the song in a way that seems funky enough or cool to me. So I can pick up on just the broad strokes of the tune really, really quickly. But I don't know if it's my ADD or what. I'm not a perfectionist when it comes to learning music off the internet. So I'll just use it for that. Really, is just to get the spirit of it. Oh, okay, it's in this key. This is the kind of jive, and then I'll go back and listen to it to kind of fill in the gaps. So, I don't know. I think that everyone is so bombarded by information coming off of their screens that I don't know, even that there's so much information available to us, I don't know how much aptitude we have to really even take it all in. So I think that presents another kind of unique opportunity and challenge. And that's for people to like, hey, I can pick up the pieces, and learn the little riff on it. And then I can go back and like jam it and be pretty more prepared than I probably would be if I was spending an hour and a half trying to learn that one riff off the record, but maybe still taking it to a place that it hasn't been before. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so my background is education and research, and there's a framework called cognitive load, which is basically what you're saying, that there's a point of saturation for learners, regardless of what they're absorbing, where literally it's just, you can't hold it in anymore. Right. And then what happens to the learning process? And I would love to dive into that in the musical sense, both as a fan, also as the artist, because I think it goes both ways. There's so much out there, and you could spend so much time really digging in. And I love to, like you mentioned, international. I love to really get into Discogs and like just see what's there and then try to find the stuff. But it does get to a point where it's almost overwhelming. And so learning how to kind of back away, or maybe just change your focus a little bit, is important. And one of the things that comes up for us in conversations is this idea of instrumental versus vocal driven music, and what that's like right now. For a lot of the bands that we talk to who are really instrumental heavy or all instrumental, it almost feels like a calling in a way, because that's definitely a choice, that has to be made. Do you have thoughts? Like, is that something that you all have kind of debated over time, or has it always kind of been, no, this is who we are, and this is kind of the direction that we're going to stay?
Yes, we've debated over at length for many years with many booking agents and many talent buyers and all kinds of people who want to put vocals on everything because that's like a recipe for success in some way. And I have always strongly been of the position that the music that is calling me right now, and that is called Polyrhythmics together, is instrumental music. And there's a lot of different reasons for that, but the most important reason is it's just what we like to do, right? This is just what we're into. I think there is some of my favorite music is vocal music. And it has been a struggle for us in the 12 years that we've been doing this, as a live act, to get booked in the right spots and to get on the festivals that we want to, primarily because we're an instrumental band and there's only so many slots on a blah, blah, blah for an instrumental band. Now, in the last 5 or 6 years, that's changed a lot. And I don't know if the pandemic had something to do with that, but now it's like instrumental music is becoming much more popular. I think partly we owe to electronic music some of that. But I think that it is more and more popular than it has ever been. And I think that we could reach a time where we have an instrumental act like Return to Forever was in the 70s playing a stadium. You know what I mean? I think it can happen. It's almost happening now in some jam bands scenarios, So I think that, why we chose to do it is everyone probably has their own internal side of it. My overarching piece with Polyrhythmics is that we love backing up vocalists, and we have worked with some that we really, really love, and can make great music that way. But it sort of is once you put words on something and you're speaking to an audience that understands that language, it kind of makes it less explorable to your mind, right? It has a topic. You like the singer's voice. You don't like the singer's voice. It resonates with you. It doesn't resonate with you for some reason. It brings you back to that moment in time that you can never forget. Whatever it is, it's there. With instrumental music, everybody who listens to a song is going to have a different interpretation or have a different feeling potentially from that song. Some people may find feelings in common. Some may find feelings that oppose each other, and everyone gets to decide sort of where that goes. That to me is like everything about music. When I listen to music that, I listened to in high school, and it still makes me feel like the way that I did in that moment when I first heard it, whether it's vocally driven or not. The way that music makes you feel is the ultimate gift. It's the ultimate resource that me and my fellow musicians were put on this earth to deliver, and through us channeling the, you know, the spirits and everything else. But it's also the thing that we need to receive on a daily basis. And I feel like just the world as a whole needs, you know, you need to be able to have a soundtrack to your life where that doesn't dictate something to you. And that's why we're doing it.
Yeah. I like that word exploratory, because I don't know if I've thought about it that way before, but so much of the music I listen to, both recording and see live, is instrumental only. And I think there is something about being able to stand there in your own thoughts and in your own head and really go wherever you want to go with it. Or, you know, you're going to bring your own stuff into the show with you, whatever's going on. And sometimes it's a way of even working through that, because you do have that time and space in a different kind of way. I see where you're coming from. It's
therapy, right? Time at a time. Stuff that we don't, you know, that we don't necessarily get as much of in this world and I think every day that every person who's been on this earth has lived, they've gotten less of that in the entire point of history up until now, maybe since the Industrial Revolution until now. So I think that you know, if you can listen to a song, some of them being 17 minutes, some of them being 2 minutes, whatever it is, and it take you on a little bit of a journey of your own mind or psyche, then what's better than that, right? It's free drugs.
Always fun to think back to the conversations that we've had. We mentioned earlier a little bit about Coachella and other festivals. I know that we are turning the corner now. Spring's coming. There's going to be so much music happening. I don't know about Baltimore. I know here in Denver, literally every weekend, every day of the week, there's something else going on. So I'm curious to know what people's plans are, maybe how far out they're actually planning their spring and summer music travel. Because that is definitely something that is on my mind these days, is trying to budget and figure out timing for all the things I want to do.
Well, you know, Fish is looming large, probably on a lot of people's calendars. There's some big circles that weekend.
Big time.
I've heard that Peach Fest is not happening anymore. It was bought up by Live Nation or IEG or one of them, and they're shutting it down. They had some issues last year. I guess there was a fire and some other things, but kind of makes me sad. But on the other side, Summer Camp has been rebranded and is still going to exist. So I guess you got to take what you can with that.
Yeah. You know, actually, it's true. I had read somewhere, it wasn't a confirmed source or an article. I think it was just somewhere on a subreddit that apparently the last couple of years for Peach Fest had resulted in some pretty big financial losses. But there's also a rumor that it's going to be back in 2025 at a new location. So we've seen that happen, with Summer Camp and others. So maybe it's a rebranding year.
Right. And they would be nice. I mean, that place was cool, but it was a mountain. Like hiking back to where you camped was just hell, especially after dancing and partying all day, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's so many different places that something like that could be held. Maybe it's a good thing. Pause it, let people wonder, talk about it.
Right, exactly. All right, with that, why don't I leave you with stay beautiful, but don't stay underground too long. I'll see you next week, Amanda.
All right, Kevin. Have a good week.